Hey folks, welcome back to Forgotten Battles of WWII, where we tear down the legends and reveal the raw, often brutal truths behind the machines of war. Today, we're soaring into the skies over the Eastern Front for a plane that terrified the Red Army like no other, the German Fw-189. Nicknamed the Rahmen, or Flying Frame, for its twin-boom design, and called the Flying Eye by the Luftwaffe for its unbeatable reconnaissance skills. You've heard the myths. This ugly duckling was invulnerable, a slow but super maneuverable spotter that dodged fighters, survived insane damage, returned riddled with holes, and directed artillery hell on Soviet positions with pinpoint accuracy, making it one of the most hated aircraft of the war. But here's the shocking nightmare we're uncovering: why Fw-189 crews endured pure hell in Hitler's unbreakable flying frame, crammed into a glassy greenhouse cockpit that turned flights into freezing, vibrating torture sessions, vulnerable to any fighter that caught them, with weak defensive guns, unreliable engines in Russian winters, and a job that meant constant exposure to ground fire and interceptors. This is the story of a plane that was a godsend for German ground troops, but a curse for the three-man crews, pilot, observer, and rear gunner, who risked everything in this fragile bird, with epic survival tales from Stalingrad pockets to Kursk offensives that hid the daily misery. Let's climb in and see how the invulnerable frame became a flying hellhole. Picture this: it's 1941. Barbarossa rolls, and the Luftwaffe needs eyes in the vast Russian skies. The Fw-189 enters service in 1940-1941 as a tactical recon plane, designed by Kurt Tank's team to replace the HS-126, with that unique twin-boom setup for a 360-degree glazed cockpit giving unmatched visibility, two Argus AS-410 inverted V12 engines at 465 HP each for redundancy, light armor around vital spots, and superb low-speed handling that let it loiter for hours over the front.
It could turn on a dime, fly slow without stalling, spot Soviet movements from afar, and call in artillery or Stukas with deadly precision. One F-189 crew could disrupt an entire division's advance. Germans loved it, tough enough to take hits from small arms and return, maneuverable enough to outturn most fighters in a dogfight if caught, and so effective that Soviet troops called it the Crutch, or Rama, with dread, putting bounties on them and prioritizing shoots. Early war, it dominated, flying low and slow, evading AA by hugging terrain, surviving damage that would have downed others thanks to the twin engines, lose one, limp home on the other. Crews earned Iron Crosses for spotting hidden Red Army concentrations or guiding panzers around flanks. On paper, it was a winner. Short takeoff from rough fields, good range with drop tanks, and that all-around view making it a flying command post. But the nightmare started the moment you climbed aboard. The crew of three squeezed into a central nacelle that's basically a greenhouse. Pilot up front, observer in the middle with cameras and radio, rear gunner in a dorsal turret with MG-15 or twin MG-81s. Visibility was godlike forward and sides, but rear defense weak, and the whole thing vibrated like crazy from the twin props, shaking bones on long missions up to 6-8 hours. No real armor for the crew, just some plates around engines and fuel, meaning ground fire shredded the glass and flesh easy. In summer, the greenhouse effect turned it into a sauna, crews sweating buckets, dehydrated and dizzy. In winter, the opposite, freezing cold at altitude, no proper heating, frostbite on fingers and toes, oxygen masks icing up. Engines were underpowered for evading fighters, top speed only 260 miles per hour, so if a yak or lag caught you, it was prey for clouds or trees to hide. Defensive guns? Pathetic against armored Soviet fighters, rear gunner often outgunned, and the fixed forward MG useless in turns. Many crews felt like sitting ducks, knowing one burst could turn the frame into a flaming coffin. Reliability issues piled on. Argus engines finicky in Russian dust and cold, oil freezing, props icing, forcing emergency landings on belly in hostile territory.
Maintenance was tough. The twin booms meant awkward access, and in forward fields, parts scarce. Crews flew multiple sorties daily, exhaustion building, nerves frayed from constant flak bursts rocking the fragile airframe. Soviet pilots hunted them relentlessly. Free hunt groups prioritized Ramis, and ground troops blazed away with everything. Yet the plane's toughness shone. Stories of FW-189s returning with 100-plus holes, tails shot up, one engine out, landing on rough strips. But for every miracle return, others plunged in flames, crews bailing over enemy lines or burning trapped in the cockpit. The psychological toll was massive, knowing you're the eyes everyone depends on, but also the priority target, flying low where every rifle aims at you. By 1943, as Soviet air superiority grew, losses mounted. The invulnerable frame became vulnerable. Production shifted to ground attack variants with bombs, but recon birds suffered most. So, was it genius design or death trap? Stick around as we dive into the bloodiest missions over Stalingrad and Demyansk pockets, where frames saved armies but crews paid dearly, and how Soviets finally countered the nightmare. Let's get into the frozen hell of the Eastern Front winters, because that's where the FW-189's invulnerability myth really cracks and the crew suffering hits peak nightmare. From late 1941 through 1943, these frames operated in conditions that would break stronger planes. Russian winters with temps plunging to -40, snowstorms blinding everything, icing on wings and props turning the bird into a sluggish brick. The Argus engines, already temperamental, hated the cold. Oil thickened, fuel lines froze, carbs iced up, forcing pilots to nurse throttles constantly or risk flameouts mid-flight over enemy territory. One engine quits, you limp home on the other. But in blizzard whiteouts, navigation was guesswork with primitive instruments, magnetic compasses spinning near the poles, radio frozen or jammed by static. Crews flew with electric suits if lucky, but often just layers of clothes that restricted movement in the already sardine-tight nacelle, fingers numb on controls, toes frostbitten even on short hops. The glazed cockpit, great for spotting in summer, became a freezer. Condensation icing the glass from inside, forcing the observer to scrape constantly while juggling maps and camera. A rear gunner shivering in his open turret, MG jamming from ice buildup. Soviet ground troops knew this weakness and waited for low cloud days to move. But when frames appeared, every rifle and AA gun blazed up, shrapnel pinging the light frame like hail on a tin roof. The plane's toughness helped. Thin skin took small caliber hits without structural fail, and twin booms meant tail damage rarely fatal. But crews inside felt every bullet, glass cracking around them, blood from shards mixing with sweat or frozen snot. One famous survival, an FW-189 over Demyansk pocket in 1942, returns with over 200 hits, tail boom shredded, one engine feathered, landing on belly. Crew alive but traumatized, ears ringing from noise, bodies bruised from turbulence. But for every tale like that, others ended bad, caught by patrolling yaks or La-5s that outsped and outgunned them easy. Rear MG-81s too weak to deter, pilot throwing the frame into desperate tight turns that stressed the airframe, G-forces blacking out the observer, gunner blasting futile bursts until overwhelmed. Soviet aces like Pokrishkin racked kills on Ramas, calling them easy points despite the maneuverability. Catch one unawares, dive in, and it's over. Over Stalingrad in late 1942, the encircled 6th Army depended on FW-189s for spotting Soviet buildups and directing the dwindling Luftwaffe strikes, flying through intense flak corridors that ringed the pocket, planes returning peppered or not at all. Crews knew each sortie could be last. Low altitude for recon meant constant machine gun fire stitching the fuselage, observer ducking while photographing troop movements, pilot weaving treetop level to evade, vibration from props numbing hands hours on end. Exhaustion was killer. Multiple missions daily, little sleep in frozen hangars, nerves shot from near misses, many crews cracking under strain with what Germans called Flieger nerves. Fuel shortages later forced shorter loiters, but pressure stayed. Miss a Soviet column and ground troops pay. The rear gunner had it worst, exposed in turret, wind blast, freezing face, limited ammo belts running dry fast against multiple attackers, often the first to die when fighters struck from behind. By 1943 at Kursk, Soviet air dominance made Ramas rare, escorted by Bf-109s if lucky, but often alone, losses climbing as VVS hunted them priority. Ground attack variants with bombs or cannons helped, but recon birds suffered most, crews feeling obsolete yet vital. The plane's design genius, lightweight for agility, twin engines for safety, became a curse in prolonged war. Underpowered for quick climbs away from trouble, fragile to sustained fire, no self-sealing tanks meaning leaks ignited easy. Crews respected the frame's toughness, but hated the vulnerability. It brings you back wounded, but rarely unhurt, one pilot said. Psychological hell compounded physical, knowing you're the most hated target, Soviet propaganda offering rewards for downing Ramas, troops cheering when one fell. Yet they flew, saving German armies time and again with intel that turned battles. So, genius or suicide machine? Hang on for part 3, where we'll break down the bloodiest ops over Stalingrad and Kursk in detail, famous crew survival miracles, how Soviets countered with dedicated hunters, and the frame's quiet end as the skies turned red. Now let's dissect the bloodiest chapters where the FW-189's crews paid the heaviest price, starting with the Stalingrad cauldron in winter 1942-1943, the plane's finest and darkest hour. As Paulus's 6th Army got encircled, FW-189s became lifelines, flying endless recon over the pocket to spot Soviet ring tightenings, guide supply drops from U-52s, and direct the few remaining Stukas or artillery on breakthroughs.
They operated from frozen strips inside the castle, taking off in blizzards with engines barely warmed, props iced, crews in fur-lined suits but still freezing in the open cockpit. Low-level flights meant hugging snow-covered ruins, dodging intense small arms fire from encircled troops below. Soviets knew a Rama overhead meant incoming hell, so every rifle aimed up. One crew logged 50-plus sorties in weeks, returning with glass starred from bullets, booms holed, but the vibration and cold took toll. Pilots with frostbitten ears, observers hallucinating from hypoxia and fatigue, gunners' fingers too numb to reload belts. Losses were grim. Stukas escorted them when possible, but VVS Yak-1s and Lag-3s swarmed, turning slow frames into easy kills despite twists and turns. Many ditched in the pocket, crews captured or freezing in snow. Others shot down directing the doomed airlift that failed anyway. The frames delayed the end, spotting relief attempts like Meinstein's, but crews knew it was futile, morale cracking under hopeless odds. Fast forward to Kursk in July 1943, the biggest air-land battle ever. FW-189 swarmed the skies free offensive, mapping Soviet defenses in depth, but once fighting started, they paid dearly. Flying over the massive minefields and dug-in T-34s, low for accuracy, they braved the heaviest AA ever. Soviet divisions had dedicated light flak batteries just for Ramas. Barrages so thick planes flew through black puffs, shrapnel fretting fabric and glass. Crews described it as flying through hailstorms of steel.
cockpit filling with cordite stink, observer ducking while snapping photos, pilot jinking wildly, straining the airframe. When Soviet fighters scrambled in numbers, now with better radios and tactics, intercepts rose, the frame's agility helping evade but not escape bursts from 20mm cannons that tore booms apart.
One documented miracle? An Fw-189 over Prokhorovka tank clash returns with tail shot away, one engine out, landing on one boom. Crew survived but shell-shocked. But most weren't lucky. Production couldn't replace losses fast. Units depleted, crews flying patched birds with battle fatigue. Soviets countered smart. Dedicated hunter pairs of yaks freelancing for recon planes, ground controllers vectoring fast, and by late 1943, improved radars spotting low flyers. The frame adapted with night ops, or armed variants packing 37mm cannons for ground attack, but recon corps suffered, crews feeling hunted prey. Famous aces like Ivan Kozhedub bagged multiple Ramas, calling them valuable but vulnerable trophies. As war turned, Fw-189s shifted theaters, Finland, Balkans, but Eastern Front broke them. Over 800 built, but hundreds lost, many to non-combat, like icing crashes or exhaustion errors. The Soviets captured some, flew them briefly for eval, confirming the greenhouse hell in their winters. Legacy? A tactical masterpiece that won battles with intel, but at crew cost few remember. No ejection seats, no heavy armor, just skill and luck keeping them alive. Pilots respected its handling, calling it honest in turns, but hated the exposure, the endless strain, the knowledge one bad day meant fiery plunge or Siberian camp. It outlasted expectations, serving till 1945 in spots, even post-war in some air forces. But for WWII crews, it was pure hell wrapped in genius design. The invulnerable flying frame was unbreakable until it wasn't, breaking men who flew it instead. So genius recon bird or death trap in disguise? What shocked you most, the survival miracles or the daily misery? Drop comments below, like if this flipped the myth for you, subscribe for more sky-high WWII truths, and share with your aviation fans. Thanks for flying through this nightmare on forgotten battles of WWII. Next, we'll uncover another perfect machine that tormented its own. Peace out.